this Thermochromic line where we do some really cool things to help the electrical industry. And these are things like putting clips on a conductor. And if that conductor goes above 70 degrees Celsius, it'll change color from purple to pink, and then it'll lock in at that color so that whenever that problem occurs, you didn't have to be there to notice it. You could come back days, weeks, months, years later and see, hey, at some point there was a problem here.
What kinds of electrical failures are most common? How can those failures impact safety, uptime, and budgets?
Well, it's really interesting when you dive into this topic because so many people think of electrical issues. They don't always go to the source that causes the problem. They find at the end, after the damage is done, that there's a defect somewhere, and they never look before that defect happens and find the real causes of these things. And so common problems are overheating, loose connections, different things that you would think are very subtle and insignificant, but in the big picture of electrical failures, that end up being a major problem that most people never find until it's too late.
How do thermochromic indicators work, and why are they a game changer for electrical maintenance?
When I was a kid, the big phase was mood rings. And so you'd put this ring on, and based on the temperature of your body, which does fluctuate a little bit based on, if you just ran around the block, you'd produce more heat, and the heat would be transferred into the ring temperature would change color. And so that was a phase for a while. And then I don't want to date myself, but later on in my schooling, there was a phase where you could buy these shirts, and they were thermochromic shirts. We call them hypercolor. And so you'd wear the shirt, and depending on, once again, your activity level, that the temperature was set in that pigment. It's just the pigment that changes color is what it is. And so the pigment would get to a certain color and change based on how the shirt was made. And you could put your hand on the shirt and you could remove your hand, and there'd be an imprint showing the outline and be that color that had changed. Well, you take that technology and move it up further. I remember as a young kid, I had a fish tank, and you put this little sticker. It was a little indicator strip on the side of the glass so you could monitor the temperature of the fish tank. It was Thermochromics. It was a simple indicator that showed temperature, and based on where that temperature inside the tank was, that temperature scale would rise on the outside, and that particular temperature would light up. You'd see that color through that. And so now we fast forward here, and Iris owns this Thermochromic line where we do some really cool things to help the electrical industry. And these are things like putting clips on a conductor, and if that conductor goes above 70 degrees Celsius, it'll change color from purple to pink, and then it'll lock in at that color. And that's the unique part of what we offer that's very rare. Thermochromics, typically, they'll change color when temperature changes, and then they'll revert back after that temperature is raised or lowered. So we have a technology that actually locks in that changed state, so that whenever that problem occurs, you didn't have to be there to notice it. You could come back days, weeks, months, years later and see, hey, at some point there was a problem here. And so there's that. Not only is the technology advanced today where we can set it for very specific temperatures that are extremely repeatable and can be used in industry in very sensitive situations or a variety of applications, depending on what the customer needs may be.
Can you share a real-world example where SafeConnect prevented an electrical failure or saved a company from a costly shutdown?
Absolutely. So here's a great real-world example. We had a customer who had put thermoclips on their product. They were having actually issues with the refrigeration unit. It was a major retailer, kind of like a Walmart that you'd find here. This was over in the UK. And they were having a problem with this refrigeration unit, and they kept troubleshooting it. They couldn't find the issue. They didn't know exactly what was causing this problem. So they put thermoclips on a variety of the wires that were feeding this location. And by the next day, they actually saw there was one phase that was overdrawing and causing an overheat issue. And that's what's actually trickling down. They kept replacing motors and other things on this refrigeration unit, trying to find the real culprit. And the reality was they were chasing the wrong area. And that's so true in any kind of troubleshooting. It's really easy to change out things thinking, well, it might be this, it might be that. if you don't have a lot of indicators, in a variety of locations, then it's really hard to pinpoint where the problem may be occurring. But the problem in most applications is if you put sensors on in a variety of spots, it can be very pricey. And Thermochromics are a very low-cost solution that's really providing continuous monitoring 24/7 and at a very, very low cost, easy to install.
Beyond safety and reliability, how does thermochromic technology support sustainability and energy efficiency?
Yeah. And this is really where we're seeing more and more interest in today's industry. People are not only looking at how do I solve these problems that are reoccurring, in my production facility or manufacturing site, whatever it may be. People do have those issues, and this can help solve those. But the bigger issues today are how do we become competitive in the marketplace and stay competitive? How do we not only, become profitable, but how do we become sustainable? And sustainability is actually a really quality word because it means something different to all of us. Like my definition of sustainability is going to be different than yours. For most people, it's how do I be a good steward today of the company where I work or the company that I may own? How do I provide a good environment for my employees? How do I provide a safe environment for my employees? And then more importantly, how do I make that so this is long-term viable? I need to continue to be profitable. I need to continue to provide a workplace for my employees. And so by doing that requires sustainability. If I'm throwing, money out the window by having, loose connections and not being able to identify that, I'm throwing money away. At some point that's going to catch up. The companies that we had, my background was in the automotive industry, and back in the 80s, companies in the big three automotives in the United States, they made money in spite of themselves. They didn't have competition. And there's a lot of industries out there where the competition is minimal until it's not. If you're making a lot of money, people always want a piece of that pie. They want to jump in. And then when the competition increases, you're going to have to do something to separate yourself. You're going to have to do something unique and distinctive that your competitors aren't doing if you want to be long-term sustainable. And that's where products like Thermochromics can come into play, because for a very low cost, you can become very competitive by getting rid of some of the defects in your process. You can become safer because things are operating in the levels that they should be, and you're not wasting energy. And so the overall plan of what you're putting into your facility is producing a certain result, and that result ends up being sustainable if you do it correctly.
Where do you see this technology going in the future? Are we moving toward a world where all electrical systems have over-temperature monitoring?
This is fun too, because one of the big buzzwords that we've seen over the past 5 years is, IoT, Internet of Things, sensors on everything. And so it's really increased the quality and, in many circumstances, the enjoyment we get out of things because of this new technology. Like I know we got a new washer and dryer not too long ago, and I get a indication on my phone when the cycle is done on the washer, so you can take the clothes out, throw it in the dryer. Like just cool stuff, right? I mean, we're getting feedback from devices we never even could imagine before. And so there's sensors everywhere. I'll give you a really easy one. There's like if you have your car and you're driving around, you don't have to necessarily watch and see if you've hit 5,000 miles or 8,000 miles or 10,000 miles before you have your next oil change. You just get an indicator that pops up and says, hey, it's time to change your oil. So in a way, we have less information that is being forced at us. We just have quality information that we're being given. And so I extend that into in the world that we're moving into. We will have more sensors everywhere. They're becoming cheaper. It's easier to gather the data. The data is cheaper to store. It's cheaper to gather all this and keep in a way where the information's available. You add on that layer AI, which now can interpret a lot of this data in a very simplistic fashion, kind of like what's being done in your car. It's interpreting how hard you're driving the car, the temperature outside that you're driving your car, how many miles you've driven. All that comes into play. It's not a set number anymore of how many miles you've driven. It takes all these factors into play, and then gives you this indication saying it's time to change your oil. In the real world, sensors do the same thing. They give you better feedback. So you're not just maintaining something because it's been a year or you've ran something for X number of hours in your facility. That time-based maintenance is a thing of the past. We now are moving into condition-based monitoring, or more importantly, operations-driven safety and reliability, where we're getting information that tells us basically when we're getting near the end of a life cycle of a product, a process, whatever it may be, so we can do that required maintenance or that replacement of a product before it fails, but not too soon and not too late. And so all these sensors just continue to give us more data that we can now put into AI, or we can make more informed decisions. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we need sensors on everything. They have their place. And as we move forward, what technology many times teaches us is, although it's available, we don't always need it. And so you could put very expensive sensors on a lot of your process, on a lot of your different pieces of equipment, and have some overkill, or you could make it very simple. Like, that's why I think the key of Thermochromics is a simple, low-cost solution that can give you so much data relatively easily without putting in, a whole network of wires and, a system to gather all that data and then alarming and all the rest of that. It has its time and its place, just like everything does.
Red Talks features voices driving safety, reliability, and innovation forward in the industrial world. If your work challenges the status quo, we'd like to hear from you. Learn more at redtalk.com/about.